Has Washington, D.C. ever seen a legislative battle quite like this? The air in the nation's capital is thick with tension, echoing with the shouts of protesters and the furious debates within the hallowed halls of the U.S. Senate. At the center of it all is President Trump's colossal legislative package, affectionately dubbed the One Big Beautiful Bill. But what exactly makes this bill so big, so beautiful, and so incredibly controversial? And why are senators racing against the clock, aiming for a 4th of July deadline, even as alarms blare over a potential $3.3 trillion addition to the national debt? Just days ago, in a late-night Senate session, this nearly 940-page behemoth scraped through a key procedural vote, advancing with a razor-thin 51-49 margin. The victory, hailed by President Trump on Truth Social as a great victory, was anything but unanimous, even within his own party. 3 Republican senators, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Rand Paul of Kentucky, and Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, initially broke ranks, highlighting the deep divisions this bill has ignited. Tillis expressed profound concerns over the bill's proposed Medicaid cuts, warning of devastating impacts on healthcare access in his state. Rand Paul, a staunch fiscal conservative, balked at a provision that would raise the national debt ceiling by a staggering $5 trillion. While Johnson eventually switched his vote after intense closed-door negotiations, the initial dissent was a clear indicator of the treacherous path this legislation still faces. The One Big Beautiful Bill is a sprawling tapestry of policy changes, touching nearly every facet of American life. At its core, it seeks to make permanent the $3.8 trillion in Trump-era tax breaks that are set to expire in December. This is a monumental shift, one that proponents argue is essential to prevent a massive tax hike for American families and businesses. Beyond extending existing cuts, the bill introduces new exemptions, including no federal taxes on tips, overtime pay, or certain automotive loans, a direct appeal to blue-collar workers. It also proposes an increased $6,000 deduction for seniors earning under $75,000, and a boost to the child tax credit. For high-tax states, a significant provision quadruples the state and local tax, SALT, deduction cap to $40,000 for 5 years, a key concession that has been a major point of contention. But the bill isn't just about tax cuts. It's a comprehensive package that also funnels an additional $350 billion into national security and immigration enforcement. This includes a hefty sum of $46 billion for the U.S.-Mexico border wall and $45 billion for 100,000 migrant detention facility beds, all part of the president's ambitious plan for the largest mass deportation operation in U.S. history, aiming for roughly 1 million deportations per year. The funding would also support hiring 10,000 new Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) officers with significant signing bonuses, and a surge of Border Patrol agents. The Homeland Security Secretary would gain a new $10 billion fund for grants to states assisting federal immigration enforcement, while the Attorney General would oversee a similar $3.5 billion fund. New fees for immigrants, including a proposed $1,000 fee for asylum applications, are also on the table, sparking outrage from immigrant rights groups. On the spending side, the bill proposes significant cuts to some of the nation's most vital social programs. Medicaid, the government healthcare program for low-income and disabled Americans, faces steep reductions. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, estimates these cuts could result in 11.8 million more uninsured Americans by 2034. The bill also includes new work requirements for many able-bodied adults without dependents receiving Medicaid and food stamps, extending to individuals up to age 65. Food stamp benefits, known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, would also see substantial reductions, potentially affecting 3 million recipients. These provisions are deeply controversial, with critics arguing they would disproportionately harm vulnerable populations. The fiscal implications of the One Big Beautiful Bill are perhaps its most contentious aspect. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, CBO, has delivered a stark warning. The Senate bill could increase the federal deficit by nearly $3.3 trillion over the next decade. This is a nearly $1 trillion increase over the House-passed version of the bill, which the CBO projected would add $2.4 trillion to the debt. For a nation already grappling with a $36.2 trillion national debt, these figures have ignited a fierce debate about fiscal responsibility. However, Republicans, particularly those in the White House, are actively disputing these CBO estimates. They argue that the SIBO's traditional scoring system fails to account for the economic growth that the bill's tax cuts and deregulation would generate. Instead, they are pushing a current policy baseline approach, which effectively assumes the 2017 Trump tax cuts are already permanent, thus zeroing out their cost in the budget. The White House Council of Economic Advisors has released its own analysis, claiming the bill will boost real wages, reduce the deficit, and add at least 1.1 percentage points to annual real GDP growth, leading to a fall in the debt-to-GDP ratio. Democrats and many economists have decried this as magic math, arguing it deliberately obscures the true cost of the tax breaks. Protests against the bill have been ongoing and widespread. Demonstrators, carrying signs and even cardboard coffins, have gathered outside the U.S. Capitol, primarily voicing their anger over the proposed cuts to Medicaid and food assistance. Groups advocating for healthcare access and poverty alleviation have been particularly vocal, highlighting the human cost of these policy changes. Immigrant rights organizations are also fiercely opposing the bill's expanded immigration enforcement and increased fees, which they argue will create insurmountable barriers for vulnerable individuals seeking safety and opportunity. Within Congress, the One Big Beautiful Bill has created unusual alliances and deep fissures. While it ultimately advanced in the Senate, the vote highlighted internal Republican disagreements. Senators like Tom Tillis, who recently announced he would not seek re-election, stood firm against certain provisions, suggesting a growing discomfort among some Republicans with the bill's scope and its potential impact. House Republicans, particularly members of the conservative House Freedom Caucus, have also raised significant concerns about the Senate's version of the bill, warning it could face steep odds in the lower chamber if certain changes aren't made, especially regarding the debt impact and Medicaid funding. An amendment proposed by Senator Rick Scott of Florida, which would significantly hike the Medicaid financial burden for states that expanded their Medicaid population under the Affordable Care Act, has become a key point of contention. Its passage, some House conservatives argue, is essential for their support. The Senate is currently engaged in what's known as a Vote-a-Rama, a marathon session of amendment votes where senators can propose changes to the bill. This process, often chaotic and unpredictable, will ultimately shape the final version of the legislation that could eventually head to President Trump's desk. The use of the budget reconciliation process allows Republicans to bypass the typical 60-vote filibuster threshold, meaning they only need a simple majority of 51 votes to pass the bill. This procedural maneuver underscores the urgency with which the administration is pushing for this legislation, aiming for a swift passage before the Independence Day recess. The implications of the One Big Beautiful Bill are vast and far-reaching. If passed, it would fundamentally reshape the American economy, social safety net, and immigration system for years to come. The debate over its contents is not just about policy, it's a battle over competing visions for the future of the United States, pitting fiscal conservatism against social welfare and national security against human rights. As the Senate races against the clock, every vote, every amendment, and every protest outside the Capitol carries immense weight, shaping a narrative that will undoubtedly define a significant chapter in American history. The world watches, waiting to see if this One Big Beautiful Bill will indeed become law, and at what cost. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.